90% of the drugs being sold on the streets of London now come from Afghanistan. 75% of global heroin production comes from Afghanistan. This is by far the largest heroin producing nation in the world. All signs are that poppy cultivation is going to continue to go in the wrong direction unless there is a significant change in the counter-narcotics resources and effort in this country.
It's a curse. It's a beautiful flower, it's a flower of death for the addicts at the extreme end of the chain, the drug chain, and for the farmers. It is indeed the threat which could undo many of the accomplishments of the recent past, the constitutions and the process towards elections and everything else, if indeed the problem is not brought under control.
In 1979, Afghanistan became one of the last battlegrounds of the Cold War when Soviet troops marched south across its border. US-financed Mujahideen groups rose up against them, and after a 10-year guerrilla war, saw off the invaders. But victory failed to deliver peace as the Mujahideen squabbled over the spoils of power, leading to widespread destruction and terrible loss of life. But with the superpowers gone, so the world forgot about Afghanistan and its people. Until September 2001, when terrorists, many of whom had been trained in Afghanistan, launched attacks on America. The world was stunned. While their back was turned, a group of fundamentalist religious students, known as the Taliban, had conquered most of the country and set Afghanistan on the path of pariah state. In response, a US-led coalition of states allied to Afghan opposition groups attacked the Taliban and quickly dislodged them from power. But coalition forces restricted their security efforts to areas in and around the capital, Kabul, allowing the warlords to retain control of much of the countryside. Those warlords not already involved in the cultivation of opium soon became involved because drugs offered them the profits they needed to recruit and pay their militias. As a consequence, the Afghan opium trade is now worth over $1 billion a year in farm gate prices alone, and drug profits are now believed to be a major source of funding for international terrorism.
Most of the security efforts in here after the fall of the Taliban were focused on cleaning up the terrorist problem, chasing down Al-Qaeda and Taliban remnants. What the international community did not focus on in the immediate aftermath of victory over the Taliban was the security situation on the ground for ordinary Afghans. Warlords, drug lords, private militias roaming the countryside, enforcing their will through the rule of the gun. In that kind of security vacuum, poppy cultivation blossomed because there was no rule of law.
Poppy cultivation is highly labor-intensive, requiring 10 times more man-hours than wheat and creating huge demand for labor. Each seed capsule must be lanced 7 times to release the milky white sap, which the sun then bakes to a reddish paste. Many farmers turned to drought-resistant poppy during Afghanistan's recent 5-year drought, and a good opium harvest remains the farmer's best hope of surviving the long winter months.
The reason that poppy cultivation has increased in Badakhshan to get rid of the debts, to find food for their children and like a very good way of income for the people. But like last year, if they were cultivating wheat in 1 jirib of land, they were getting some amount of money like $100 or something. Whilst they were cultivating opium in 1 jirib of land, they were getting almost something equivalent to $3,000 to $4,000 per jirib of land, which is a lot.
The intensive production demands of poppy cultivation offer unique opportunities to women in a society that traditionally frowns on female labor. Dr. Anis Agdar is head of the Badakhshan department of the Women's Ministry.
واقعا که یک زن که زمینش کشت میکنه و یک عاید زیاد به وجود به دست میاره و زمیندار هم است، از نگاه اقتصادی که تقویه شد، خوب عین موقف مرد هم میگیره. فرق بین مرد و زن در افغانستان هم است که زن آورنده مواد غذایی به خانه است، در غیر از او کدام.
Poppy cultivation has gone through the roof in Badakhshan in recent years. And given that one of the main reasons cited by coalition leaders for going to war in Afghanistan in October 2001 was to stamp out the burgeoning opium trade, a British-funded eradication campaign was launched 2 years ago. Last year, they paid cash compensation to farmers whose crops they had eradicated, but this simply encouraged more farmers to grow poppy. So this year, the compensation package has been scrapped, and now, just as the back-breaking 7-month production cycle nears its end, the eradicators are back, and farmers are angry.
امی تریاکه بشه پا مرا بشه پا اینه مرا بزن اینه مرا بزن بالیاز خدا بالیاز خرام بتی نام بتی گندم بتی نام بتی توبه کرد که بالیاز خدا خرام
یعنی ما هر زمین سر هر زمینی که میریم از کشتال ما میگیره از تپی ما میگیره ما را دو میدن دشمن میدن ما بیرون میگه ما غریب هستیم بیچاره هستیم هیچ چیز نداریم ما نمی کنگنار هستیم میگه دولت گمش که ما گمش میکنیم ولی همین بیچاره غریب چی کنه نه بیچاره برادر کدام زمین داره زمین مردم است پاسترکار است برادر غریب است دست طفل تو خوش بگیره مجبور است افغانستان بره
که ضد بشر است ضد چیز است ما از مجبوری این کار خراب میکنه کار نیست دیگه کس نیست گندم ارزان است
مجبوری میکنیم
از مجبوری میکنیم ما دیگه
دولت با ما کار پیدا کنه
دولت برای ما کار پیدا کنه وطن ما دولت آباد بکنه بازسازی شروع بکنه نام بده برای ملت برای ملت غریب نام بده ما همین کارا نمیکنیم.
But the task of eradication has been assigned to provincial governors, many of whom have a vested interest in the drugs trade. Ikramuddin, the governor of Badakhshan, has already been paid more than $100,000 to destroy poppy fields. But the campaign has only just begun, and evidence suggests the effort is largely symbolic.
واقعا عکس العمل‌های مردم بسیار زیاد جدی است. چرا خب اکثر مردم فقیری هستند که یک جریب دو جریب اونجا کشتی کوکنار دارن زندگیشان متکی به عمو است. از آنمو طریق تامین معیشت میکنن و زندگی خود پیش میبرن. امروز وضعیت قسمی شده که یک جریب زمینی از او تخریب میشه و آدم فکر میکنه که خلاص تمام امکانات زندگی از دست از آدم گرفته میشه و همونجاست که دست به عکس العمل میزنه.
But it is not just the increasing production and traffic of opium that worries the authorities. The use of narcotics also threatens to spiral out of control. And after 25 years of war and suffering, who could be blamed for relying on heroin to take the pain away?
The impact is particularly severe in the neighboring countries. Iran has 3.5 million drug addicts, the highest rate in the world, associated to a very high percentage of these drug addicts affected by HIV/AIDS. In Kyrgyzstan, in Kazakhstan, in Tajikistan, up to 90%, between 80 and 90% of the drug addicts are HIV positive, and 90% of the new HIV cases are coming from drug addiction.
Since 1984, the production of opium in Afghanistan has increased 20-fold, with over 85% of its provinces now producing the drug. After cultivation, opium and its refined derivative heroin are then trafficked through Central Asia, Pakistan and Iran and on to the rest of the world. Globally, the rate of heroin addiction stands at around 0.3%. In Afghanistan, that figure doubles. In Pakistan and Central Asia, it triples. In Iran, there are 9 times more drug addicts than the global average. But as is so often the case in post-conflict situations, even when the will exists to tackle a problem, the necessary resources rarely do. There are some rehabilitation centers opening up in Kabul, but there is a desperate shortage of beds available to addicts. Law enforcement efforts have met with limited success in the way of seizures, but they remain understaffed and under-resourced. And in such a heavily under-resourced environment as Afghanistan, corruption flourishes, adding a potent fuel to the fire of the drugs trade. General Helal is Deputy Minister of the Interior.
یک تعداد دیگه از موقعیت‌های دولتی که در وجود دارن در بخش‌های مختلف در حمایت از این پروسه قرار گرفتن. ما یقین و باور دارم که تا زمانی که در پشت این پروسه حکام دولتی منسوبین دولت قرار نداشته باشه، این پروسه را با این ابعادش در جامعه ما ممکن نیست که عملی شود و بتونه قاچاقبرای مواد مخدر.
But perhaps the greatest threat that the opium economy poses is to Afghanistan's nascent democracy and its ability to hold free and fair elections. So long as drug resources remain in the hands of regional commanders, central government will continue to be thwarted in its effort to impose the rule of law. And without the rule of law, democracy and reconstruction will continue to elude the Afghan people.